Scott. Here. Okay, so
Scott's walking.
we have enough copies of the agenda to go around. The first order of business is to look at the minutes from the last meeting. And to approve them. Oh, good, Scott's here. We were just about getting started, Scott. And if you don't mind sliding your chair over here, well, you can sit there, I guess. Yeah, you'll be fine there. Okay, good. Thank you for joining us. Okay. So first order of business is to look at the minutes from last time. If you don't mind, I was thinking it would make good sense to read them quickly. As opposed to just simply saying pass them. And I do have 3 or 4 things I noticed that I would like to correct. So draft minutes of June 12th. Claude Lemoy called the meeting to order at 8:50, present, and so on. Well, I don't need to read the names. I was elected chair. Claude Lemoy was elected chair with no opposition. Tom Milligan was appointed to prepare the minutes. The first item of business was to determine what the committee's working plan would be considered a capital asset. The committee determined that for the present, a capital asset would be one which costs more than $10,000, would have a useful life of more than 5 years, and would be a non-recurring annual expense. The next item discussed was the CIP planning tool being developed by the town administrator and the finance manager. The object of the planning tool is to look at the cost of an asset over its life and to determine an annual cost. The purpose is to level out the funding such that inflation is the only variable. Included in the cost of an asset are depreciation, inflation, trading costs, financing expenses, and other miscellaneous expenses as part of the acquisition of the asset. The key pieces of the planning tool are the inflation rate and the replacement cost of an asset. The committee then discussed the scope of the work of the committee and the expense that might be considered a capital improvement would fall into the work of the committee. Buildings, any expense that would extend or enhance the life of the building would be a capital improvement. The town administrator would monitor the buildings and advise of improvements to be made. Roads, paving, ditching, culverts, and bridges and other expenses. I should have said culverts and bridges and other expenses. To extend or enhance the life of the road would be a capital improvement. Vehicles, any major expense to enhance or extend the life of a vehicle would be a capital improvement. A capital improvement would also include ancillary equipment for vehicles such as snowplows, trailers, tires, salt, or sand spreaders. Lower cost items should not be considered capital assets. Water and sewer items used by the water and sewer department that meet the definition of capital assets fall under the auspices of the committee. Such items are assets of the town and should be reviewed and tracked by the committee. Transfer station, the items used by the transfer station, if they meet the definition of capital assets, should fall under the auspices of the committee. The town administrator reported that the experience with the leases and leased equipment so far had been quite good. The backhoe and grader are here and in use. The trucks won't be available until next spring. The following meeting schedule was agreed to: July 17th, August 14th, August 28th, September 11th, October 9th, October 23rd. The meeting times will be at 4 p.m. Town administrator advised that Guy England would be available to advise on the condition of the equipment on a contract basis. Tom Milligan moved to adjourn. Mark Hudson seconded the motion, passed unanimously at 10 a.m. Respectfully submitted, Tom Milligan. To follow Robert's rules as I know them, we need a motion to approve.
Make a motion to approve.
We have a second. A discussion on the motion. And if you all don't mind, I have 3 or 4 things I picked up today, and then others can take over. First of all, Tom, would you please remove the L at the end of Lemoy in 3 spots near the top?
Trying to give you an L.
There's an extra L. Try to give me a promotion. And then, and in the second paragraph, you say present were Claude Lemoy, Mark Hudson, it's Mark Houston.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so change Hudson to Houston.
H-U-S.
No, H-O-U.
H-O-U. Let's do one.
HOUS.
Like the city. DON, yeah, just like.
like the city in Texas. And it
Okay.
appears again at the bottom of the, while you're at it, at the very bottom, you have Mark Houston seconded the motion. At the very end for adjournment,
Okay,
his name is there again, same correction, please.
got it.
The next thing I have is, I'll say it's grammatical, in my opinion. And it has to do with the definition of capital. It's in a paragraph that says, the committee determined that for the president of capital asset would be. The end of that sentence says, and would be a non-recurring annual expense. I don't think that's grammatically correct. I think we wanted, what we intended to say, subject to discussion, of course, is that, and would be a non-recurring expense, period. To say non-recurring annual is a little bit, I don't know, I think contradictory. What does anybody else think? I think we just want to say, and it's a non-recurring expense, or another way to say it, and does not recur annually.
You want non-recurring expense or non-recurring? The problem is non-recurring expense. You are making expense every year on this stuff.
Well, but on different items. For example, if you buy a bulldozer, you buy it once, you don't buy a bulldozer every year. So it's a
but I mean,
non-recurring, the bulldozer is a non-recurring expense.
Well, you're
So
gonna,
the bulldozer is a capital item.
you're gonna replace the bulldozer.
Eventually,
It's then that's a recurring event, isn't it?
the money placed in there towards these
All right.
purchase is recurring expenditure.
Well, it's basically replacement or upgrades that extend the life. I mean, that's really
Correct.
what we can.
but
stick
the
with.
definition needs to, there are also other things that are bought every single year that are not included in capital, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, like,
Recurring
okay,
expenses that are
like,
bought every year.
because one of the items you mentioned in there, I agree with, but it has dual meaning is tires, okay?
There you go.
If you're buying grader tires, that's $12,000
There you go.
that you're gonna buy every 5 years, but you're gonna buy 8 or 10 truck tires at $500 a piece that are
Yeah.
gonna be $6,000 purchases
Right,
every year.
right.
So they would not be a capital item.
That's not a capital.
But
item, right, right.
the
becomes
greater tires,
recurring.
yeah,
Okay.
the greater tires are, yes, that's a
Okay.
once in a however many years.
On this wording, I just wanted to raise the discussion. If everyone else is comfortable with it the way it is, then I'll back down. I thought it didn't read quite right to me. What does the committee want to do? Want to leave it alone? Do you want to change it to something like would not be a recurring annual expense?
Make a motion, leave it alone.
Leave it alone. What do everybody else think?
I'll second that.
You want to leave it alone? Okay, we'll leave it alone. And then I had one other item. Let's see. Down below, under vehicles. Any major expense to enhance or extend the life of the vehicle would be a capital improvement. Then, you wrote, Tom, a capital improvement would also include ancillary equipment. Such as snowplows, tires, salt or spread. That's not what we've done in the past, snowplows, tires, etc.
The snowplows
Would not-
are a capital expense because usually they're bought with the trucks anyway.
Oh, if it's part of the truck package, yes.
Yeah,
Agreed.
but a replacement plow would not be.
Right,
Salt is not
right.
a capital
Salt
expense.
Salt spreader.
It says salt spreaders. Sorry.
Okay, yeah, salt spreader would be because that's an attachment, you know, and when you talk about ancillaries, that include trailers. We have a more bark chipper
Right.
that's however many thousands of dollars, and that's not gonna be bought
Right,
very often. That is a capital item.
So the question is that worded properly? That would include, capital equipment would include, ancillary equipment such as snowplow trailers, tires, is it worded properly? To have an appropriate definition.
Well, as long as you take it in the context of your definition of what a capital expenses, which is over $10,000, I think.
Right. Yeah,
Okay.
it's gotta meet both.
Okay, all right, so we'll leave it alone, very good, all right, now those are my comments, thank you very much, Tom, the minutes were very good.
Okay.
Other comments, please?
Yeah, I have one thing that we discussed that didn't appear in here. We asked that the town administrator forward the spreadsheets 2 to 3 days in advance of the constant. I'd like to add that to the minutes.
We did,
And
We'll talk about that.
yeah, it didn't come in till like 5 o'clock last night, so,
I said it's
but it was in there.
But, yeah.
We said it possible.
So.
It was,
Let's have Tom.
We said it possible, but I wanted to add it to the minutes.
that's
Let's
fine.
hold on. The committee requested the town administrator to provide the Excel planning tool by email a few days prior to meetings in the future, if at all possible.
It will always be possible once it's done the first time.
But that's a recording of what we
Right,
said.
and that's fine. I'm just saying, so yeah, we will be,
We get things happen.
Yeah, I
but
just-
Yeah.
it was
You okay
a
with that?
cluster at the last
The
minute.
town administrators to provide the Excel planning tool to the committee a few days before the meeting.
If
By
possible.
email.
Then he said by email if
By email.
possible,
Yes,
When possible.
when possible.
Yeah, well,
whatever. Sal is correct, we did discuss that and.
Yep.
Okay, good. Other comments on the minutes? If not, the maker of the motion and second, you're okay with the changes?
Move to accept.
Okay, then all in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, so that's the minutes. So the biggest thing on the agenda for today is number 2, review of what I call the preliminary CIP plan, which is to be presented by Chet here. It's the brand new tool that he was bringing to the town. He's gonna show us, I hope, the structure of it and the features of the tool. And maybe you may or may not, I don't know, have some preliminary dollar estimates in there. I wasn't sure how far you've gotten in that regard. So with that, I'll turn it over to Chet, so he can present the planning tool to us.
Okay, and I just want to give you guys some background as to where we are. One of the things that we were looking at is, are we funding at the correct level and looking at how the capital is going to look and even operationally. We decided to take a step back a little while ago, and Carrie Ann went back to as far as, I think that's all you could get online, was to 2001, the budget. Which was an operating budget of $1,754,000. And we said, what would it look like if we had just followed inflation? From 2001 to today, and we have not been even close. When you look at the column here, this one that says under budgeted by inflate, this thing's moving. Stop it.
Hey,
This one here is how much we under budgeted on an annual basis.
Or over, but you didn't.
Well, yeah, we only did that 1 year. And this thing is moving with one finger and it's not.
it's been around on you, huh?
Yeah, well, I'm doing just one finger and it's moving.
Which
So-
finger- Which finger you use?
Yeah, well, that's the problem. So what we did is we followed and what was your? I forget which CPI we used.
I just did the historical New England
Right.
Consumer Price Index.
So we looked at how we were doing, and when you look at this column, all of these numbers are an annual underfund compared to what inflation would have done to make it equal. When you look at these there's 5 red years, that's 5 years that each year the budget was reduced. Okay, and it started in 2007, where they were actually cutting the budget even though expenses were going up. Because one of the things is whether it's capital or whether it's operations, there's a cost that goes with running the town, and there's a cost with having the equipment. Even if you don't replace it that year, you're still expending value. So we have to make sure we fund that. And the interesting thing is, this is a 23-year cycle. And when you look at this number, this is the cumulative underfund over 23 years. Just saying the 2001 budget was correct and we followed inflation. We left $17,900,000 on the table. When you consider that we have a 20-year paving plan, typically it's a 20-year cycle is how it's calculated. And you look at trucks and what our fleets cost, that is all of your capital that we underfunded, which is why we are where we are today. Basically, that, we have $11 million worth of paved roads. Okay, in 20 years, you should have expended that whole $11 million plus 3 more years. So we're not meeting the requirements. So when we went back to the tool that I've used before, we wanted to go, okay, because the best example I can give you how this all works is in the equipment budget. Again. The equipment budget, basically, and I'll go to the information sheet just to start. When you look at the equipment, we have a back sheet here, and it starts right there with the GMC number 2. And we start with the year of the equipment, the number of years of the life cycle. Okay, it's all the way over here. So you have replacement years. These are the things that we will be looking at, is what do we want our replacement cycle to be? But this row is just saying we expect 10 years out of this vehicle, or we expect 6, or we expect whatever that is. We talk about what the replacement value is, and we talk about whether or not we're going to have a trade-in. We estimate a trade-in. So then when we go back to the capital worksheet and get to this section, then what will happen is when we fill out that back section, it will set the years that we're supposed to replace each piece of equipment and put the correct number in there. If you look up in this top left corner, there's an inflation factor, and this is about 3%. Okay, it says 103%, so it's just multiplied, but it's a 3% inflation factor. So it assumes that the value of the vehicles is going to go up by that much each year. And then we can adjust it, and it tells you how your funding is going to work. So we funded $200,000 last year. The plan for this year was 250 and 350. But if you take the life cycle and the
Question?
replacement, go ahead.
The plan last year was 250 for what, please? For highway vehicles or
all
for
for
all capital? or what?
Highway vehicles.
Highway, thank you. Keep going.
Okay, when you look at this number here, for the current year, 431,000, that is the current appropriation to keep us sustainable to actually have our cycle work.
What number, please? I'm not seeing.
It's right down here in the bottom left. So this
Oh,
number
that,
is
Dave, thank
actually the
you.
recommended annual appropriation to make us be able to replace the equipment on a regular cycle, whatever cycle we pick.
Mhm, mhm.
Okay, so when you look and you say, well, this is where we are today. And because I think the proposal was to do 250 for the year we're budgeting for, 350 for 2026. And then we started putting in, and then it was 425. But you see already in year 4, because we're underfunding by that, it already goes negative. So the key is we have to get to a properly funded program. Again, this doesn't have to be the final say. We got to go in and say, what's our cycle going to be? What is our replacement cost going to be?
So
And that number then is calculated.
not to delve into this for a long time, because it would be premature at this meeting. But as I recall, the reason this year was as low as 250 was because for this year, we didn't purchase any equipment, and we put the other money we would have put into capital into the lease payment, into
I
aside
understand,
for leases.
but the
to
one
be
thing,
paid elsewhere, that's
the
all.
one thing I want to, and this is probably the most key point of this entire process, is this calculation has nothing to do with what you're buying this year.
Okay,
Okay, we have to set how much are we going to be able to spend, and then we say we take our priority list and fit the priority list into the funding
Right,
mechanism.
right.
Okay, they're two completely separate. For the first time, it's probably going to be a
Well, this year,
completely separate
last year,
items.
the reason
Oh, yeah, no, I
it's not
understand that.
250 was the reason I just described.
Right,
It was lower because of that.
I understand.
why- Yeah, yeah.
No issue.
So now we'll do it differently.
No, so I'm saying going forward, and
Yeah,
the one thing we want to make sure we do is we come up with a plan that's going to say, here's the next 5 years. We can look at it and say, is it going to keep us in the black? We will know that right on the first day. And then we put in the equipment that's going to work, and we see how the cash flow works. That's the beautiful thing about using reserve funds. One of the things that we were talking about earlier, and I was talking with the attorney about, is the way our warrant articles are set up. Half of them are set up so that we have to have the voters vote to put the money in, and the voters vote to take it out. Some are the voters put it in and the select board can spend,
Right,
and I think it just has to do with who did it at the time.
right.
Because the question becomes, especially on the equipment side, and this will be a conversation for you guys to come up with, is do we want to revisit that language for equipment, because like this year's buying the trucks and all, it was kind of all done ahead of time, but not hard numbers and doing a bid process afterwards. And then what if the number's 10,000 higher than what we got budgeted for it? You know what I'm saying? Got approved. So it's a
Let me
crazy.
ask. It seems to me that you're talking about, we're looking at the money first.
Right,
In the past, we've looked at the equipment first.
Right.
We wanna buy, but here we wanna see, okay, how much have we got? Then we get that number, then we can look and see what equipment we wanna buy with that money.
right. And they're gonna be happening simultaneously, but one doesn't affect the other, technically. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're gonna have a meeting in August, probably the 14th, where we start bringing in department heads and talking about their capital needs. They're gonna set a prioritization. Once this committee decides how much we're going to appropriate, then we will apply that to what needs to be purchased. And we do that as a first draft for all the departments, all the equipment. And then when we get down, we go, okay, are we missing any critical items? Do we have to move? And then we start, you have to do your adjustments. But the key to this whole thing, because, you know, the one name we started with, we call it Planning Made Simple now, but it was originally called the Sustainable Capital Funding Model, so that you're funding at a certain level, and you're funding that level for the next 10 years. And the only thing that's gonna change it is the inflation rate. Okay, so you go up by 3% or whatever it is on an annual basis, but it stays level for all the items, whether it's capital equipment, whether it's paving, whether it's gravel roads. And then there's the police and the ambulance, and all those are much simpler. Fire trucks is a whole nother discussion that we'll be having too. But the goal is to say, how are we gonna, we know we're underfunded by $220,000 right now annually for what we have proposed for this year. We know that we're already there, and okay, what's our plan to get to? And how long is it gonna take, and how much is that gonna change? Like, okay, we have an 8-year cycle. Do we have to go to a 10-year cycle for trucks to make that work? This is the exercise we're gonna do to come up with this plan. Because once we set the first one, it should get much simpler. Now we're tweaking. You know what I mean? Because annually,
Your other sheet, the first one, where you're basically setting the timeframes and that kind of stuff. And so, basically what you've got here is you're making assumptions that we're gonna have a 10-year life on something.
Right.
Which then dictates when we have to buy.
Right.
Based on when the last time we bought was.
right,
Right, so if you changed any one of those, that would theoretically also change the.
right. This number here, this is the number that will change almost annually.
Right.
Because if we find out, okay, last year we bought a truck for 250,000, now it's 280, this will change. And we just put in the new number. This is the lifespan.
Right.
That's the one that dictates most of it.
Right, that's what I thought. Okay, good.
Okay, so that will actually then, the whole calculation changes. So what'll happen is, once we get everything inputted, like the rest of it, because right now we're okay on the equipment. Mostly. The paving and the roads are the ones we're not all entered in yet. Once we have all of that and we make these selections, then you guys will come in and say, I think you should move this or move that, and let's change. Anything in yellow is variable. Because when you look at the capital worksheet, the goal of the capital worksheet is, this is a place where you see the years in yellow. What we can do there is say, well, we plan to buy it in 2028, but we're not gonna be able to buy that till 2029, and we just shifted a year. Okay, what you don't,
That would be a result of what happened in the last.
that is correct.
Yeah.
And then what'll happen is because this number here, the 250, that's the appropriation.
Yep.
That's the thing that we have to get to someplace and then not let that slide. Because what you'll see, and one of the things is, and it shows you the 50,000 right here. But go ahead, like, I've had situations, and it's one of the things I think that happened here, where when your inventory is pretty decent and you have equipment that's working and you're okay, there's a real tendency when you have some stress on money to say, well, let's just skip a year of appropriation. We're gonna take a timeout year. This will show you what damage that will do. And it doesn't mean you can't do it. You just need to know what it's gonna do. You know what I mean? And how do we accommodate that?
One of the other things that we've got to stay on top of is, especially with the equipment now in trucks, you're looking at a 1.5 to 2 year from ordering to receiving. So
Yeah.
I've been there, done that, had a committee tell me, well, that truck's still running good. And I'd say, it's gonna take me a year to get the truck. I have to order the cab and chassis this year,
Right.
even though it's not
To get
going,
it-
it's
to get
scheduled to
it
be
next year.
replaced
Yeah.
next year.
Yeah, well, ordering is not because of.
Well, the problem is they-
But you-
Require the funding.
Well, the problem is.
But you
they
have,
say we
you
push
you
late.
need to have a
It
signature,
needs to be in place for the.
correct?
time
But the
to
issue is,
get it.
what I will tell you, and I think it's one of the complicated factors that we have here, having a mechanic. There's been this philosophy that we could just keep fixing things and moving them over. One of the things we're gonna do is breaking all the equipment down when we have the repair budget and start assigning costs to the repairs, because I think what you're gonna find is once you get outside that 7 to 10 year window, the cost of repairs
It's
go insane.
It goes exponential.
By the way, have you spoken to Guy about getting a update on all the equipment, you know, this document here? that-
Yeah, Guy's doing that.
Okay. The sooner we can get our hands on that, that would be.
Yeah, and I was talking to Guy, he's only here 1 day a week right now,
Good.
so, but he did agree that he was gonna come in, update that.
Great.
And I talked to him a month ago and we've talked a couple of times. I know it's on his radar. But yeah, we will have that so that we can then start to, cause. You know, as much as I don't wanna say this, I mean, one of the things that we're discovering is some of the issues we're having is not necessarily equipment age or failing, some of it is maintenance issues.
Sure.
Okay, and we gotta find that balance, so we will be able to further refine this year.
Mhm.
We're gonna make a plan for this current year.
Right.
And try to get, some funding in there, but we also have other things we're working on. We're gonna start oil undercoating our trucks. Before the winter, like, we're losing everything to salt. And we're going to be doing, Scott mentioned one of the things about on some of the smaller trucks, maybe we should just pull the wheels, pull the brakes, the rotors and everything right at the end of the season and just replace them, because it's not that much money to buy the parts. And making sure we don't get to this point where they're in there with torches and wrenches and banging the stuff off of there.
in the winter.
Yeah, well, in the spring, we gotta get it in the spring, once the winter's over.
Do it in the spring so that you're not doing what you just described. in the
Right,
winter.
that it's becoming,
Well, it gives you new brakes through the summer.
Right.
That's what happens on these smaller trucks. The way they're built now and junk metal
Yeah,
is you'll get brake rotors don't stay, calipers don't stay.
right.
At the end of the winter, I found that we replace them in the spring. Now you have the brand new brakes to go through the summer,
Right.
and they're good right through till the next year.
For the next year, yeah.
If you wait till fall to do them,
Yeah,
you have that binding up all summer long to deal with.
And then
and
it
trying
breaks
to
and they
stop
don't
the
run at
trucks.
all, and we end up with
Yeah.
we have a bunch of
So,
metal parked
yeah.
over there a lot because of these things.
so if I could jump in for a second, I want to pick up on the point that Scott was making about the lead time, 1.5 years in some
Yeah.
cases, some trucks. And I want to connect it to something that I understood what you said earlier in the meeting, but I'm not sure everybody did. So let me try it from this point of view. We knew at this time last year, let's say, summer, fall, that we were going to need a particular truck in 2025. We put it in the capital plan, we asked the voters to set the money aside in the capital plan. And we wrote a warrant article to ask the voters, because we're supposed to, we have to right now. To ask the voters to approve expending the money to buy that truck. But the vote doesn't occur till March.
Correct.
And legally, until the voters vote and approve and say, yes, you can buy the truck. The town cannot sign the purchase order for that truck till at least the day after the town meeting.
And we signed it right
And-
around April 1st.
And we signed, right, so a point that you're making is, in some cases, that's too long to wait. Point you made earlier was. If the town could change the legal requirements so that the Board of Selectmen is authorized to expend. The Board of Selectmen could have authorized the purchase order 4, 5, 6 months earlier.
Well, see,
We're still gonna get the truck when we
Well,
want
see
it.
what I did,
So that's what was going on.
and that,
Go ahead.
yeah, the way I handled purchasing, especially with trucks. Is we would decide in this time frame what we were going to be replacing this year. I would go to the vendors and ask for a budgetary number
We did that.
for that piece of
Yeah,
equipment.
yeah.
First, after the 1st of January, then I would put out RFP for bid and have right on the bid that the acceptance of a bid was dependent upon the vote of town meeting.
Right.
I would have all of my numbers of exactly what that was going to cost.
Right.
So more than once, town voted on Saturday, Monday morning, I was ordering a truck,
Yeah,
given the
understand.
final.
well, that's a
We did that
reasonable
last-
way.
What you just said is what we did last.
Okay,
year.
well,
We
what
really
this
did.
does, by doing it that way, a lot of your dealers now, because of that lead time you need, they put that order into the factory.
Yeah,
When you get it all
Yeah,
spec'd
when
out,
it
they
goes,
put
yeah.
it into the
Right,
factory.
right.
If it's voted down, especially plow trucks, is such a demand because of the lead time.
Right.
Usually
They
they've
get
got
reallocated.
customer, yeah, that
Yeah.
reallocates to
Yeah,
someone else
I
on the
understand.
list.
Right.
But the one advantage of this program, because we've had situations when it wasn't as crazy as it is right now,
Mhm.
where it's like, if you buy it this time of year, hey, we had 4 trucks come in, we got a deal on it.
Better
So-
deal, yeah.
See, with the advantage of having a fixed appropriation, when you get the money into the reserve account, and if the select board can expend it,
There you go.
we
You
have
cut
the
a purchase
ability.
order Whenever you can get a good deal.
That's,
You don't
and,
have to wait
and
till
also,
meeting.
and
Yeah.
once we're satisfied that all of these things take time,
Right.
you know, and right now, the biggest problem is Viking, because they're pretty much the only game in town, and it's hard to get a truck built.
So maybe to try to finish that discussion for today and go back to your
Right.
model in this. What does it take in the town of Canaan to change the rules?
A new-
So that the board can expend instead of.
We have to
voters?
we actually have to ask the voters to change it from what it was
All right. so
to
we
what
gotta
it
put
is.
that
It's a warrant
on the
article
next town
to
meeting.
request
Fine.
for, because
Alright.
it, especially for
We'll
equipment.
have to think about doing that, yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
because about half of them are expended by the select board anyway, and one of the other things we'll talk about is paving. Paving is another one that has, we're gonna say, here's what your appropriation should be annually. To say, well, some years we might only spend, let's say it's $500,000, and it's like, well, this year we're gonna spend 350 because we're only doing this road, or we're only doing a reclaim. But next year we're gonna spend 700, and allows the money to carry.
Level it over, yeah.
You know what I mean? So you
Okay.
get a leveling
So we'll
of
come
that.
back to that another day, but it
Right,
would be a.
so-
a
so
warrant
basically-
To the voters, okay. go ahead.
Yeah, and basically, you know, when we look at this, we're just starting to put together this is the government buildings fund that you can't see any of the words on the left.
Yep.
I'll get over there, right there.
Yep.
No, it's still not showing. Jeez. But basically, we have to look at each of the buildings. We're creating a replacement value, creating a life, and then looking at the expenses. One of the things the first thing we've got a price on that I think is critical, is the rest of the roof on the senior center. That'll be like $44,000. And I know there was a comment that the back of the building was done like 8 years ago. They did the shingles, but they did it over 2 other layers. So it was the 3rd layer, which means we had no warranty. And they're not looking too good right now, and there's some problems. So to finish the rest of the roof and be done with that and say watertight, is kind of the goal. So that'll be an item we look at on the buildings. This will be the same kind of a process where we come up with a value that we're gonna say, this is what we need to be putting in our budget on an annual basis for replacement value. Because, you know, the one thing that people don't realize, if this building was brand new today and it was a $2 million building, well, 3% of that, or, you know, $60,000 or $80,000 you gotta start putting that way in the first year on that, and we've not done anything with buildings, and our buildings are a mess. The town garage, you see the digging out back, that's because what's the right word? We used wire, you know, just almost like knob and tube level, but not to that bad, to run our fuel pumps, and it all failed. Everything failed. Inside what do they call that stupid thing?
The Quonset
The
hut.
Quonset hut.
I know where they came from.
Well,
There's a town in Rhode Island.
Okay.
I was born and raised in Rhode Island, named Quonset.
Oh, really?
And Quonset was a naval air station.
Okay.
Repair facility,
all of these
And
were.
they developed that
That style,
And they
okay,
call them Quonset huts.
okay. Well, the interesting thing about that, it's leaking so bad that the electrical panel had so much water in it that her bottom rusted out of it. And that's the electrical panel. So we are now bypassing the town, the garage and going around to get the pumps properly done. The, under that lean-to, there was indoor quality, electrical panels, and outlets, and nothing was protected.
That lean-to was put up when they had the retired state shed across the road for a truck, and then they put that up so we could get trucks out of the snow because they were parked outside.
Yeah.
And as long as you dismounted the plows, the trucks would fit in. And then they literally just Romex house wire so you could plug.
And so
Yeah,
And,
you want
and,
next house wire.
and all it was, and then there's the
Yeah.
way I understand it. They have everything, every circuit inside the garage is kind of overloaded. And they had this big pile over in the corner. Then they ran a hole through the wall, put an outside plug, and everything's plugged into that.
I think your point there was not enough money has been put aside for building.
Buildings, yeah, well, it's
In
versus,
general.
yeah,
That's
I mean,
one
in general, I
example.
mean, if you look at this, we're probably, you know, 150 or 200,000 underfunded on the buildings, you know, and again, the goal is, let's put the report card out there. These are the issues. And then it's like, okay, and where do we got to get to? And how do we get there? You know, and it's just, how do we get to that point? But we're going to start addressing all these issues. Because one of the things that I should stay away from the word offensive, but offended me a little bit was how nice the meeting house is and how we don't use it for anything and the town hasn't, and we're not really keeping up with that. Like, everybody relies on grants, you know, to do all of this work, and grants are great, but they sometimes cost more money, and sometimes they're gonna dry up here shortly. You know, I mean, everybody knows that a lot of these funds are going away, so you know, we need to have something, we're gonna say, okay, what level are we gonna maintain these buildings at? And making sure that we don't lose them, because we got water running in everything. I mean, I don't know if you've seen the hole that they dug in the front of the second tier on the museum. There's a little front, there's a
No.
hole that they dug out. It was all rotted and all you see is rot in there.
Mhm.
You know, I mean, so, and the water that was running in well, it's running in the front of the highway garage at the office. The water's been running in there for years. And they got a price of $5,000 or 2 years ago or 3 years
It was
ago.
about 4,200.
Yeah,
They
and they
said
said
it was
no,
too
they
much.
said buy too much, buy caulk. We're fixing that as well.
So they tried caulking, the problem is they didn't caulk the source of the leak. Seriously.
And the problem is it's the way the two windows have their channel on the top and they're not connected and everything has failed. So all it takes is he's taking off the two long panels, gonna put in the proper
header.
the proper header and all of that, and then we will address the problem. It's not a huge issue.
So-
What else do you want to show us on your tool?
Yeah.
This,
Yeah, we need to see more about the tool
Well,
itself.
if there's anything else you want to
Yeah,
show us.
yeah.
I mean, the reality is that the other one, well, Bridges is gonna be probably the easiest thing we deal with this year. Simply because,
I mean,
the-
I'm talking conceptually, Jeff.
No, I know.
I get the two pieces. and
no,
that's-
the reason the bridges are gonna be the easiest is that we have 3 bridges we're getting for free.
Pretty much, yeah, yeah.
Um, So on the paving side, we have a similar type of a process where we look at the road condition. We look at where we are in the cycle, whether, you know, the road has reached the point it needs a reclaim or if it's just a mill and pave, things like that. One thing I don't like, if we can avoid it at all cost, is shim and overlay, because it just never gets you anywhere and you keep raising the elevation of the road. It's just not a good plan. But
I have the
then
question of the 20-year lifespan
on roads,
on the bulk of our roads, because with the traffic levels we're getting, that's too long.
oh, I don't disagree. Okay, I'm saying what I was told. So
Yeah.
remember, what we're trying to do,
Those are things that we can discuss.
Right,
You know,
because the one thing,
that's
there's roads that are gonna be half of that. They're gonna be 10 years. Okay, and when you go 10 years, all it does is affect what you're putting in. And I would argue if you put this in the correct way, meaning we say, okay, some of them are actually 10-year and not 20, and we set that all up and we look at rebuilding these at the current rates, we're looking at 600,000-700,000 a year minimum.
Oh, yeah.
So question, Because the tool, as it stands right now, have the ability, can you put in a different, life
Oh,
span
yeah,
for
right,
each,
that's
for each
There's,
road?
there's,
Number of years.
yeah, every roll has a life, every box has a lifespan. And we have
Alright.
drop down boxes in all these.
Fine.
And then you have, and then we also can choose here, when you look at the life cycle step, we have choices of, it's reclaim, well, that one's just, we select the reclaim and pave there. But you go to the bottom, these are there's a shim and pave, a mill and pave, reclaim and pave, reclaim and excavate, which is actually a reconstruct. So those are the cycles you choose, and this is what, we look at, what's the overall appropriation need to be annually, just for, we say, for the whole cycle, and then you say, okay, so, but if we take these roads and move them to a reclaim and pave where they weren't, you would hope they wouldn't have had to have done that, then it may adjust that will also backfeed your appropriation to say, okay, we gotta bump it a little above what we needed to make it work.
So can we use the one that's there right now as an example, Tablet Hill Road, 20-year life? I believe that one was done just 2 or 3 years ago, correct?
Right.
So where does it show what year it was done and
Oh,
when the next time is?
That's when we go back to the worksheet. This is where you'll actually see, and that's why I said the paving isn't done yet.
Oh,
but-
it's not in there yet.
No,
Okay, fine.
see,
Alright.
so these will actually be, all these dates will be put in. Do you see this
Alright.
budget year is not here yet?
Yeah, yeah.
They'll all be selected by when they were last
So
paved.
you need to populate some more data. on
Yeah,
it.
this was then,
Okay.
and this is why I said it wasn't ready for
That's okay.
publication yet, so we,
That's fine.
we have all the stuff behind it working now.
Good,
Right,
good.
Just in a general concept, we don't have any roads that are dirt roads now that we're planning on paving. in the near
Well, first of all,
future.
okay,
Fair to
I
say?
I will tell you, yes. If anything, in the future, and this will be a conversation probably for next year, is there any roads you want to go the other way?
Okay.
And the reason for that is because it's easier to just slap pave on mud to eliminate mud season. A lot of things are paved just to avoid mud versus they should have been reconstructed anyway. And if you reconstructed them with the right gravel, you probably didn't even need paving.
Well, this is where, as you know, the TRA program.
Yeah.
And that come about in the 60s. Unfortunately, these towns took what money TRA had, and if we pave over the mud is gone. It works to an extent because the old farmer's mix was flexible, but now to put pavement on top of some of these roads, there's nothing underneath. Goose Pond Road from the dam to the Hanover town line originally was only ever, but it's called a penetration. That's where they literally grade it, sprayed oil, emulsion oil on top of that dirt and spread sand on it. It gives you a 1/2 inch thick surface. And that was done to stop the dust for the camps.
And I've looked at it because I get a bunch of calls for Goose Pond Road people. And I drove out there and every failure is tied to a culvert.
Yep.
You can see the drainage ways on each side. It's like everything's tied to a culvert. The culverts have failed. So if we're gonna do that road, it's gonna be one of those, we reclaim it and we gotta fix the infrastructure before, nothing makes me
That's a
lose sleep.
lot of culverts.
Yes,
Or-
nothing makes me lose sleep other than paving over garbage.
Yeah.
Because you're just throwing your money away.
Yeah.
I don't know what there is here in Canaan. Just highway culverts. I had an intern come in and I gave him a job for the summer to do nothing but inventory the culverts under the town roads.
Yeah.
And there was 498 culverts.
And how many roads, how many miles?
And that's 68
That is-
68 miles of roads,
Both dirt and.
both dirt and pavement.
How many,
There's
and
around 28 miles of dirt.
did that count, was that just cross culverts or did that count driveway culverts?
No driveway culverts
Yeah,
involved.
Cause the
Just
Billington, we were the
cross
same way.
culverts.
We had 44 miles of road and we had 495.
To be clear, if I may, cross culverts go under the road.
Under the road.
Meaning the town has to pay for it.
Correct.
Whereas a
Driveway.
driveway culvert is on the property and the owner has to pay for it, right?
Well,
No.
This is where the controversy comes.
yeah, exactly.
Because in 1998, the state of New Hampshire said that a driveway culvert is the responsibility of the property owner.
That's what I was thinking.
However, over 90% of the culverts on driveways are within the town's highway right of way. So where do you delineate? Do we maintain to the header? How many homeowners know how to take care of a culvert? How much damage gets done to your road and then you tell them they're gonna pay for it? We've been talking about here in Canaan. we've
This
been
is,
talking
this is
about-
messy.
That's the problem. That's messy. I
Because
can
it-
tell you that.
because basically-
Question for you. So are you guys working on a policy?
What we have been discussing is. When you have a driveway failure that's within the town's right of way. That the property owner purchases the culvert. That the town says it has to be. And the town will install it or use a
Middle
certified.
ground. All right.
Well, we have to memorialize that because as soon as we do the first one like that, we're gonna do 100 of them.
Yeah.
Well, this is what they did the last couple of years. They started doing that.
I know. And I don't disagree. Yeah, I don't disagree because we lose use of the drainage way, like,
Yeah.
it's something we have to maintain. But it's a massive cost.
Yes.
Okay, so let's go back to the presentation you're on. What,
So-
what have we not seen yet?
Well,
We've seen
basically, we'll have the
vehicles.
bridge and capital will have the same thing. It'll have a specific appropriation based on the life of bridges. An example is the Gristmill Bridge we just did the hearing for. They said it's 120 years. And we will then be saying, okay, it's a $5.5 million bridge over 120 years. How much are we gonna put away a year? Because every 20 years, we gotta do like a refurb.
Yeah.
And if you want that to be something that you don't have to pay $80,000 for, or $50,000 for, and come out of your pocket, we gotta start, the goal is to get it in the mix early
Sorry, I
on.
have to ask a question, but what you said, I think you just said it's a $5 million bridge. 120 years. Well, let's make it 100 years to be easy. So that's what, 5K a year? No,
50.
50K a year. If we were to save 50K per year for the next 100 years, is that assumes that the town of Canaan would have to pay the full ride?
Well,
Or
you
we
should-
need to assume that the state and the town would split it.
These are the-
80-20 for the future.
If you assume worst case scenario, because I will tell you my experience in Vermont, they love to do grants and get you all hooked on them. And then as they run out of money, they start getting out of that business and say it's your problem. They were doing it with dispatch. They were doing it with a lot of things.
New Hampshire's done.
The only way to protect yourself is to make sure you can take care of it yourself.
So plan worst case. And
Yes,
that's
and
right.
hope
So my
for the
question-
best, plan for the worst, hope for the best. And the thing is what the whole point of this is that we're talking about 3 bridges right now. They're gonna be built in the next 3 years.
Right,
And that's like $10 million worth.
right.
Okay. And then we have other bridges.
Yeah.
But when you put this whole thing in, you start putting the money away. Maybe it's $250,000 a year you have to put into the bridge fund. But that means when so-and-so bridge dies 3 years from now, we have the cash.
That becomes your bank.
For,
Yeah,
that becomes your bridge, it's a
Yeah,
bridge
capital
bank.
reserves are a bank, yeah.
So it
absolutely,
just be, you're
Yeah.
going to spend the money. This is, and the one thing people only think about the time they have to spend the money that year. This is the year we're building it. This is the year we need the money. But that's when you get the spikes and the issues and going to get
Well,
financing.
not
and-
quite. For the last 6 or 7 years, we've been looking 15 years out.
Right.
And we've been doing our best to level it, salt away
Right.
money. But we've been on the bridges, we've been counting on the 80-20 split, so to speak. And that's been true so far.
Right, and
In fact,
if
it's
we,
even a
and if
little
I can
better
get,
This year.
if
but-
I can get somebody at the state level to say that that's the plan going forward, we
That's what I was
can do it that way. But again, there's the 20,000, the every 20 years, I think it was, what was it, 20 years, we had to do one level of
Snow maintenance.
remediation.
No,
And then it was
you
40,
have-
there was a bigger level.
Yeah, you have upgrades, just maintenance, 20 years, which will be either like remilling the deck. Or whatever, and then at 40 years would be a rehab. Of that, because on a 120-year
Yeah, yeah,
bridge.
yeah.
You're going to end up. 20-year minor upgrade, 40 years
20,
rehab,
40, 20, 40,
20,
yeah.
40 and.
Right.
And they are not covering that part.
No, I understand.
So
I
that, and that's
expect
what
it-
we have to, and that's why I say, this is one of those, we're gonna try and get an idea and we're gonna say, okay, well, this may be one we don't increase much this year because we're gonna have to increase other things. Because
Right.
this one's a little healthier than everything else.
Right.
But these are all the things that we have to populate.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So we
So-
got, there's a bridge cycle, there's the police and ambulances and the fire trucks, like
Right.
all of the equipment
Right.
is in this as well. There's police
Right.
department with the
So that's
interceptors.
a question, each one is. Structure of your tool, are the highway vehicles on one worksheet and the fire vehicles on a different worksheet, or?
At the end of
is
the
it all
day,
one worksheet for vehicles?
everything has a
all
back
structured?
page, everything has a back page of its own. But on the worksheet, it's the entire budget. Okay, but each one's totaled separately. Like if you look, that's fire department.
Yep.
Okay, that's their
Is that what you
segment.
call the back page?
No.
No, this is the worksheet. Then you'll get this. This is the one that you can actually publish. Where'd my capital budget go? Shit. I just
So
lost it.
the work page, is a summary, basically a summary sheet.
It's a summary
And then
sheet
it's
that you
got-
can, but you still have edit capability in that.
Okay, but then there's a back sheet to it that's got the detail.
Yes, and that's like, this is the paving back sheet.
Okay,
And then there's a gravel road worksheet. Then
Yeah.
there's the information sheet for the equipment.
And.
So-
Well,
All of these things. And so
Alright.
we will be doing most of our work in the back sheets. Then when we get to the point where we're trying to determine where are we gonna spend the money, then we'll be in the overall worksheet.
Completely covered.
And then we'll be editing dates and things like that.
so where's the detail sheet for vehicles? Is that the one you're on now?
Yes,
You call it information sheet?
yeah, we just did this is the background information. We're gonna
But is it
modify
for
the name.
Vehicles only, or is it?
Well, it's vehicles only because but it's fire, police, they're all in here.
So in theory, that, the worksheet could be named vehicle detail or
Yes,
whatever.
right.
Okay, fine.
And
I
we
didn't
will
realize
be
that.
editing
Alright.
that. So yeah,
Alright.
this is all, that's all this is. Well, I think there's one other thing on here. Where to go? I also have, bridges and culverts on here, on this sheet. That's the bridge and culvert back sheet.
So if we could, on that sheet, if I may, which bridges are on there? Just the state bridges or?
Transfer
every bridge?
station, everything, well, basically, there was, your capital budget that you had last year with the
Right.
full spreadsheet. We
Right.
took everything off of that.
Okay, so. it's
So you
those
have-
bridges.
We have miscellaneous culverts, Lower Trestle, Upper Trestle, Potato Road, River Road, Blackwater, Goose Pond.
Yep.
Grist Mill, North Larry. Another Goose Pond culvert, a lot, because we do large culverts and bridges together. Because they are about the same kind of construction.
Well, that's, I was wondering, so can you show us I'm sorry, excuse me for saying, show us examples of large culverts that were added to the list? I'm not seeing them, but
Well, it says Goose Pond culvert.
You should have
Where?
one,
Repair-
South Road.
right there. Goose.
I don't have the
Pond
South
culvert.
Road one, because
Down
what,
at-
basically,
down at the-
and this is one of the things that when we give it to you guys, like, tell us what's missing, because we're taking it off the old sheet.
The old sheet, a bridge in New Hampshire is 10 foot or more expanse. Be it wood, concrete, or whatever, but it's gotta be a 10 foot,
That's it, 10? That's pretty small.
yes,
Do they do inspections of all of them?
yes. If it is described, falls under a state bridge
Definition?
definition, the state inspects them.
And do we
Yeah.
have access to those reports?
Yeah, they are supposed to be sending them to you whenever they do it.
Okay,
But you also, if you go to New Hampshire DOT Bridge Report. And then you can just click on Canaan and it will list every one that they inspect in Canaan.
perfect. Because and that's what I had before. So I just haven't gotten that far down.
So before when we discussed, we added big culverts to the bridge. And we said maybe we're gonna add the small ones too. What's your final?
That's one more wonder.
Well, what we did is,
Hundreds
if
of
you look,
those.
it's actually the bottom number, the bottom one here. That you're still not seeing. It says miscellaneous culverts is the bottom line
Where?
item.
We're not seeing
Well, I
it
just,
now.
it's
That's
all the way
all
over
over
to the
the-
left,
Basically small.
You're,
right there. You want to see it right there? Miscellaneous.
Oh, yeah,
culverts. You can't get it to stay there.
Expense on culverts generally comes in anything larger than a 36 inch.
Right.
That's when you get into a more major excavation, more major header work and stuff.
Right, but we had discussed at the last meeting that you were thinking about adding smaller ones.
Well, the thing is the 18s and 24s, we could just put that in operations. We're gonna buy 500 feet of culvert, and that's simple. And that's just something that'll carry year to year to
See,
year.
that's what's going through my head, and I'm wondering, for smaller culverts, whether they're not really operating budget kinds of things, because they're not over the $10,000 each. Although they could be 300,000 in total for the year, but each individual culvert is, a smaller one, not that expensive perhaps. Does it belong in the CIP plan, is what I'm wondering?
I would say 24, a lot of those, no.
Maybe not.
None of the
wonder.
small ones, no.
They should be in the maintenance of miscellaneous
comes under-
culverts should be in the operational.
But I would
budget, right?
argue that as soon as you end up with a concrete header on one, even if it's a 24,
Yeah.
that particular culvert's gonna be a capital item. Because it's
You
gonna
wanna
cost
put
you
those in here
$10,000.
One by one as capital
Well,
items on your
yes,
list.
at the end of the day, yes,
You do.
yes,
Okay.
because we're not typically gonna pour the headers, we're gonna spend money on those.
Last one I did 24-inch culvert, because from 12 to 24 was the same header, wing wall
Yeah.
header, just depending on opening. And the last price I had was around $1,500 per header. So right off bat, you're looking at $3,000
Not
in
installed.
headers,
Headers.
not installed,
Yeah,
to put in $2,000 worth of pipe.
Right.
okay.
But I did the last larger ones, I was able to do poured in place. Way cheaper than I could do precast.
Well, that's the interesting thing, when we were doing it we were looking at, they kept telling us we were gonna do like twin box culverts in a couple rivers. And I'm like, I said, I want a price for a concrete bridge. The concrete bridges didn't end up with the center mullion with problems. They cost about a third less.
There are,
poured in
the
place.
problem, what I ran into, because I had a triple culvert that had to go in under DES regulation and all their design. And they wanted me to use a precast. It wasn't even the cost of that precast. It was the cost of bringing in a piece of equipment that could move it
Right.
and set it in place.
So where I'm coming from in this, so is if there are 475, give or take, culverts in town, I don't see you being able to maintain them one by one by one by one on here. In terms of what year was it done, what's its life, how much does it cost?
The issue
I
is
don't
how
see
many
that.
how many of the larger
Working
ones
here.
do we have, and we have to
Yes.
decide that, and it may be
Yes, I
that we
understand.
still may call them, okay, this is gonna be a capital culvert, and we may have 30 of them, and we
Right.
just make it in one line item that we're gonna replace one.
That's what I'm
Every couple
suggesting.
years.
Obviously, you're gonna need to look at it a little
Right.
bit more, but I certainly don't see you being able to maintain every
No.
culvert in town as a land. item
No,
by itself.
anything
Number one.
that is constant flow, let's
Yep.
call it, technically would meet the definition of streams. Would be
Perhaps
on this
that.
list,
Perennial flow.
perennial flow.
So there are different factors you might use, but then you're gonna have to, somebody's gonna need to know which ones are in the CIP plan. And therefore have funding that we're gonna provide, and which ones, all those others. Are covered, have to be covered by operational money,
Right.
so that the highway department is just fixing them as they go.
And this is one of the things, like he mentioned, the
We're
inventory,
How are you gonna keep track of that?
we're gonna have to have an
We're gonna
inventory.
have
with
to
it.
put an inventory. Going to have to figure, and the
Mhm.
easiest way to do it is the month of August, that's your driest month. We've got to calculate which pipes are perennial flow, because anything that's perennial flow has to have a DES engineered
Okay,
permit.
yeah, yeah.
The minute you have to get a DES permit, you're looking at $7,000 to $10,000 for the permit,
For the permit? Oh, that's highway robbery.
It is.
Oh, my God.
And then,
That's how
it also makes the culvert cost like 200.
That's why you don't pay.
Because I had one that failed in April, filed under emergency order,
How the state makes money.
and the
That's how
state,
DES.
yeah, the state, they came back, and they have 70 days with which to give you a approval or not approval. On day 60, usually day 65 to 67, they'll say more information needed. That gives them another 70 days. I filed for an emergency order in April. They gave me my permit December 1st. on mandatory replacement.
Have you seen any of the issues where, because we were doing some
So-
and I think New Hampshire is the same as Vermont where they're issuing basically Corps of Engineers permits. Well, the Corps changed their definition of navigable waters to
Yeah.
anything that feeds in navigable
Okay.
water.
Right.
So they would show up at the last minute and say, no, we're gonna change this. And then they added like 50% to the cost of the project because they inserted themselves.
It's all very interesting, but guys, we're going.
Yeah,
astray,
sorry.
man.
Sorry about
We
that.
need to stay
See, this
focused
is
on how we're gonna do our planning.
So,
These are just
from a
things that
planning
have to be
perspective,
considered.
what I would hope is that I can, because when I had mentioned to you September was actually, I didn't see the second meeting in there for August, but
There are
August
two in
28th.
August. By the way, I am, well, we'll get to that in a few minutes, but I'm proposing that starting August 14th, we're gonna need to meet every 2 weeks.
Right,
But we won't get this done.
that's correct.
We've actually added a fair amount of scope from what we looked at in the last couple of years.
Mhm.
Including building maintenance, all this road repaving stuff, everything we're talking about, culverts, we've added a lot of scope. And I'm worried about our ability to get this done by October, I'll be honest with you. We can't wait till September before we see a more finished version. of
Oh,
this.
no, I was just gonna tell you, when I didn't see, when I was talking, I didn't see the August 28th
So,
date.
right, I have a 14th, every 2 weeks beginning
Yeah,
August.
well, August 28th, I should have you a final one of these.
We're getting ahead of ourselves.
Unfortunately, I mean, the final one would be great, but, we need to bring department heads in, right?
Oh, well, we're
Well,
gonna,
and we can start doing that
Well,
immediately.
I'm getting at, if there's any
That's next.
department heads, go ahead.
that's next on the
Yeah, go
agenda,
ahead.
we jumped ahead, so.
So let's, well, we can jump,
So as
because
soon as
we know
we're
we're,
done with-
well, I mean, we've
we're
covered
done-
enough of it right now to get an
Talk
idea.
about
Yeah.
What combination of department heads and when?
Yeah.
You want to bring in?
I would just say, for the purposes of, because we're gonna wanna have some more of this
Somebody used to do that,
information.
yeah.
Between library, police, and fire and ambulance, I think they're probably some of the simpler ones right now. Water and sewer, I don't know. I mean, I would say those three are the first ones. Water and sewer, because we got
Because
the,
we got the hearing.
because what the hearing coming up and everything else, I'm like, I don't know what we're doing there. Because we're looking at replacing the whole system pretty much. So we gotta think about how we wanna do that. Road maintenance and the highway department, I think, could be the second meeting in August. Road maintenance wouldn't be till September. And transfer station, no idea. That's a whole nother, that's a
Pick a
whole
target
couple of
that we're
weeks.
gonna go for.
Yeah, I know. It's gotta be like the second one in September, the earliest.
How
So,
can that state, transfer station bridge be a state bridge?
Because that was put in with federal funds.
And it's,
See,
And that one-
that's not the transfer station bridge.
No.
That was actually put in, that roadway and bridge was all put in with federal funds for the treatment center.
Okay.
And then the
okay.
transfer station was added
Yeah,
afterwards.
and that's the one that's an 80-20. The other two are not. They're complete,
they're complete. Wow.
Well, the only thing we have
I
to
thought
pay
they were
for,
90-10.
Potato Road, the only thing we have to pay for is more design work.
Okay.
And that's an 80-20 for the design.
20 design, yeah,
But the bridge itself, we pay nothing. And
great.
for Gristmill Bridge, if we select the most expensive option, we don't have to pay anything. It's amazing that it worked out that way, but they want that alignment. And they basically said, we
They'll pay
want
for
this,
it.
it's gonna help with the train thing. We will pick up the tab for all the
Love that.
design stuff.
Wow.
So,
They'll
Wow.
remove-
so $5.5 million and we pay the
So-
24,000 we've already paid for design. That's it.
So let's go back to departments and scheduling, guy.
August 14th is police, fire. and-
Well, wait, if you, let me recap in a minute if I may. I want to hear everything that Ted has to say.
And
first.
buildings-
Go ahead.
Buildings,
Buildings is, buildings and transfer station, they're like the end of September, beginning of October, one of those two meetings. I don't care which.
okay, so what I'm hearing, by the way, and I want to add one little complexity. I have found in the past that one meeting alone is never enough for highway department. No, never enough. We should ask the highway department in here for, I think your suggestion was the second week in August. But I think we need to plan to have a revisit on that in September. That's
Okay.
been my experience.
Okay.
One meeting has never been enough. There's too many vehicles.
And your road maintenance, it just be road improvement, because all we're talking about is the reconstruction of roads.
Road reconstruction, I call, all
Yeah.
right, fine, we'll call it road reconstruction.
Because it's just like, all we're gonna talk about is replacement costs
So-
and planning.
I'm going where you're headed, Sal. I'm not ignoring you. So the thinking here, by the way, well, let's jump quickly to what I've suggested for meeting frequency, and then we'll come back and lay them in. My suggestion again, after I looked at the calendar and thought about all this, was every 2 weeks beginning August 14th. So 14, 28, September 11 and 25, October, that only gives us 6 meetings, guys. And for everything we've talked about, I'm gonna tell you, my experience is it's gonna be hard to get it all done in 6 meetings.
Mhm.
This is a lot of ground to cover. With a whole new tool, with a lot of scope added and everything. What does everyone feel about that? I was hesitant to go to every week. If we get in trouble late August, early September, well, maybe we'll all agree we have to add a meeting to the schedule.
I mean, I think September
think?
11th will be the
We'll know by
telling
then.
point, because the
Yeah.
28th, between the 28th and 11th, the tool will be there. We'll have the funding
Yeah.
kind of laid
Okay.
out. And once we have that, and between then and the next meeting, having at least met with everybody once,
Right.
then now we're massaging,
Okay.
you know what I mean? So
Having said that, we'll use
So
this as
this
the,
is already in place, it's just gotta be all brought together.
yes,
you know, but a lot of it's not in place yet in terms of new cost estimates and so on.
Yeah, new
Right.
cost
We don't have-
estimates
we don't
on,
have
there's a
those yet.
lot of this stuff that it's just. This committee, that committee here,
Yeah,
this
yeah,
file, that file,
right.
it's gotta be
And
brought in.
accessibility and Carrie has to bring it all together and actually put it in the model.
Yeah.
That takes time too. All right, so having said that, then I'm gonna suggest August 14th, I think I'm following your suggestions, we go for police, fire, and. You said library, did you mean library, recreation and cemetery?
well, recreation,
There's probably not
we
much
don't
there.
have anybody technically in the
There
recreation
really isn't any
department.
capital there right now.
Well,
anyway.
yeah, this is something we're gonna be slowly trying to capture.
Slowly.
My hope
So-
is, actually, we had somebody volunteer to try and start leading this back and putting some budget stuff together. That's regular budget stuff, and we'll see if there's any capital.
Right,
I don't expect much.
so we're saying police, fire and library on August 14th.
Right.
Is that okay? And-
Cemetery is an interesting conversation in that we're actually approaching the attorney, because the state recommended to our trustees that they get a legal opinion on how they can use the funds, and can we cross-use funds, and between there's like 12 cemetery trusts. Different trusts.
That's endowments, you mean?
The endowments, and what it is because you're allowed to spend the money that's earned in interest. But like one has a ton of money, one has no money. It is the town's responsibility to maintain these, but those are really operations. There's not a lot of capital expense related to that.
Is that up to the board, they can do that?
Uh,
To distribute.
What we've got to get
No.
is that there's, right now it's under legal interpretation. Because the state is now saying that. We can interpret it different, but it all has to be written out by legal.
And our attorney actually has helped them write stuff at the state level, so he knows. So we're gonna get an opinion of what we can and can't do, and then we have to move forward, but. Not so much this committee,
So,
the regular budget
exactly,
committee,
right.
we have to
Yeah.
do something with
If I could
cemeteries.
ask, if cemetery believes, and I don't know who cemetery is, maybe it's you, that there's gonna be capital need in the next 10 years. What date would we want to ask that to be presented here?
That'll probably be later, like the second half of, like the second half of September. I gotta,
Alright.
once I get the legal opinion, and
So,
we'll figure out what we gotta do.
Where I'm down to is on August 28th, we do highway. The highway department that day, I believe. And following that, September 11th, we would do road reconstruction, right?
Mhm.
I think you said that would be
And
next.
and any highway,
Roads and
highway follow-up.
highway, oh, that's soon?
Well, that's
For
what
2
you had
weeks?
said.
Well, I agree on a follow-up. I was gonna provide a little more time. You think 2 weeks would be sufficient? I was gonna put the highway follow-up a month after the first one. What do
I
you
know,
think?
and that's fine.
It's up to
I
you.
just,
No,
when you look at the highway discussion, you're talking about either equipment or road reconstruction. We're covering those
Oh.
as part of these other things, and it's
Yeah.
like, there's not gonna be a lot of specific, what I'm gonna wanna hear, and it's mostly gonna come from the mechanic, is,
the highway vehicles.
yeah,
yes,
it's like,
yes.
where are we with, what is the status? What would you prioritize? I mean,
So
that's
first
the
meeting on
biggest
highway
question.
vehicles is August 28th.
Right.
And I'm looking for your thoughts. When should meeting two? Our plan to have a second meeting, a follow-up meeting.
Well, I think
2
I
weeks
would
later,
actually,
or
no,
a month
no,
later?
I would actually go beyond that because
All right. that's
it
what I
may
was thinking.
be, remember, like I said, I think at the second meeting in September or the first meeting in October, we're gonna have already gathered all the information and we're gonna be like, okay, so do we want to move here or we want to move there? And I think
Alright.
we're gonna be at that shift level. And if we have, that's when the questions would, the answers will come back. Like, we go back to them and say, we think we're gonna have to cut this or that. You know, how's that gonna affect?
So here's my only problem is the following, is that leaves quite a few things, all of them smaller. Transfer station, buildings, bridges, water and sewer, it leaves them all to October 9th, and I'll say to you guys, that's too late. Because we have to be completely done by the end of October.
No, I understand that. And I
So,
wasn't thinking
yeah.
they were all waiting. Transfer station is
So-
actually one of the biggest conversations we're gonna have.
All right, when do we wanna slot that one in then?
I'm thinking that one might be the October 9th one.
October
Because,
9th?
yeah, because we're still gathering information and that's gonna be.
Construction of it, or?
Well,
Who knows?
okay. To be perfectly honest, the transfer station 5 years from now cannot be doing the same things it does today.
Right, correct.
Okay, it just can't, it's not gonna work.
Yep.
When JR leaves, we're not gonna get a CDLA driver to run a transfer station and be hauling that live body trailer. So what do we want this to look? This is a complete, like, a master plan to how are we gonna move to the next phase? And I don't have any idea where that's gonna go.
No, because I mean, there was talk about leaving Lebanon and going farther away. You're either gonna have to still use that tractor trailer
Or some,
or a pup, which still requires Class A.
right. No, I mean, there's no, the
It's-
trailering our own trash is probably not gonna happen long term. I just don't see that as a viable option. We're gonna have to see what other options we
Okay.
have.
So I gotta put you back in, so when do we wanna do buildings and bridges? So what I have so far.
Bridges could be at any meeting because bridges are gonna be simple this
All
time.
right, then. Here's what I would suggest, in that regard, I will suggest, since we're talking the follow-up meeting for highway vehicles.
Actually, on the bridges,
Yeah.
the biggest issue we're gonna be talking about
One.
is the matching funds over the next 3 years. like how we paying for some of this stuff.
How long from your cell phone, Morgan and Morgan.
What is that?
Well, we had somebody pop like.
Anyway, so what I'm gonna suggest on bridges in that regard is. We add them to the same meeting, September 25. That would be the follow-up on highway vehicles.
Okay,
Highway vehicles and bridges on September 25. I will recap this all for you in a moment. And then, and what about buildings? When
Well,
do we wanna
buildings-
fit them in?
buildings is not gonna be a huge discussion. Basically, we're gonna look at what are, again, when the product comes together, what does the appropriation need to be? And then we're gonna look at a list of projects that we need to do. And the planning, and it's like, okay, when do we have to replace a roof? When, like this building, how old
Right,
is the roof?
so when? We
Well,
we have 5
again,
meetings.
that's one, I would pick one that's, it might even be the 25th.
25th is
of
already
September.
highway vehicle follow-up and bridges.
Okay,
Maybe the 11th right now is only road reconstruction.
That'd be
Maybe
fine.
11th could be road reconstruction and
buildings.
buildings.
Yeah.
I'll recap in a minute what I've noted here, and Tom, if you want to commit it to minutes, I can help you with that after the meeting, no problem. So what I have right now is August 14th, police, fire and library. August 28th, highway vehicles. September 11th, road reconstruction and buildings. September 25th, highway vehicle follow-up and bridges. October 9th, transfer station. Did I miss anything?
Well, I've got
Oh,
cemetery,
water and sewer. I don't have water and sewer yet. Oh,
cemetery
Did you
for the
write that all out? What do
25th,
you think?
maybe.
maybe. So 2 things to just talk about at least, cemetery and water and sewer. So should cemetery be squeezed in here?
Cemetery is gonna be a small
It's
discussion,
small,
just
right.
pick one, yeah, pick one in there.
How about we try to fit it in on August 28th?
Okay.
Cemetery. I'll add it to it. Highway vehicles and cemetery.
Cemetery will be a 2-minute
He says there's
discussion.
gonna be-
Do that
There's not,
first, and then we'll do.
All right,
Right.
the other one we haven't got on the list yet is water and sewer.
and water and sewer is, I gotta I'll talk to John. I mean, I don't think water is all spoken for. You know what I mean? We're gonna be talking about the bonding and the
Big
rates and all
projects,
that,
the
yeah,
high, that's
that's,
public meeting, all that, yeah.
yeah, so
to-
it's
if
the
we have
sewer,
anything
I gotta
we need
find
to
out,
Talk about them when.
just pick, Sewer is probably a decent
Should it be
sized
October
discussion.
9th? Should it be transfer station and sewer on October 9th?
Yes, I would take that.
Is that all right?
Yep.
Okay. So on October 9th, we'll do transfer station and water and sewer.
Cause sewer, the biggest issue with sewer is,
Yeah.
if you're talking a 10-year plan, we're looking at losing our lagoons and having to reconstruct that whole place.
Oh. And I'm
So-
not, at the moment, I'm not slotting anything in for the 23rd because that could be our last meeting where we try to put the icing on.
Well, the hope is
everything
once-
And say we're done.
Cause the hope would be that, at a lot of these meetings, we can just say, okay, we have this organized and we have it, once we have it entered, we can say, okay. We're not gonna have to deal with that again until we're having, if we have to make any edits or changes. There'll be a couple of items that will be hanging out there. And those will have to tie together at the end. And when you get used to this process and we start with the money and we keep that discussion separate from the projects. Then it becomes pretty simple.
I think that the only thing you need to think about, Claude, is that you might be meeting on N16.
We might,
You might.
we will, as we go along. if
Yeah,
we
that's what I'm
predict
saying,
we'll
that would
add
be
it
the
to
spot to
schedule.
put it in.
For the moment,
because-
I'm not gonna plan on it.
No,
Yes,
yeah, that would
understood.
be the spot.
I understand, yeah, we might have to.
Yeah.
So, and again, Tom, I don't mind running through these with you when you wanna put the final points on the minutes.
Okay,
But I see a challenge here, let me just tell you all, for the last 6 years, there's a lot of scope. There's a limited number of meetings, there's a lot of new players, there's a whole new tool being put into play. So it's gonna be quite a challenge, so we'll have to dig in. With that, does
We can do
anybody,
that.
does anybody have any other
We can do
business?
that.
would it be appropriate for Chet or Carrie Ann to send to us by email what he just showed us?
Sure.
So. that we
I would
can-
like that,
so
I
we
mean, I
can-
know
mean-
it's only, it's not completely built yet.
Yeah, but
Or-
I would say. I hope to do that in a couple of weeks. And the reason is. There's enough things that I gotta tweak and change that I don't want you to
Right.
get a wrong
But I think
interpretation,
this
so
is
let
the
me do that.
request you do it at
Keep the
least 2
confusion
days
moving.
before the next meeting.
Well, yeah, and the meeting we're gonna use this on is the 28th is what we're talking about.
Well, but
So,
no, the 14th.
Yeah, but the 14th, I won't have this won't be done by then, cause like I told you, I'm away for a week next week,
No, you're gonna be next week, all right.
so
I
that won't be
really,
done.
I really don't care about it being done.
Right.
I don't care about it being right. I just wanna be able to look at it and read it and understand it.
yeah, I'll
Okay.
put Tom on this.
Me too, as soon as you reasonably can. There's
Okay,
a couple of major things you'd like this week.
there's a
first.
couple of major things that we have to
If you
clean
get
up,
those
and
done,
then I'll send
Get
those
it out
to
to
you.
us as soon as-
Once all the back end, I don't care if I don't have all the roads listed, I don't care about any of that. I care about, no, I care about the stuff that's in the back that we're making our selections from, that you understand what we're doing, so
think
I gotta
Tom's
get
on the
that
right track.
backside done.
Yeah, I think the punchline is, we're saying, if we
Yep.
see it, we get our
I
hands
start to
on
get
it.
familiar with how to look
We'll
at
be
it.
able to help move forward faster.
I agree,
Yeah.
I just wanna make sure all of the things in yellow make sense,
I was gonna say,
and that's the key.
You know,
what might work
We don't
there,
care.
even if you get one department where you have the cover and the back page together, those finished,
Right.
maybe.
Well, the
Yeah,
problem is
I
it's
get
taking
that.
them apart the way all the formulas work, so but if I can do that, the one that's technically. It's done physically. But all of the data isn't adjusted to whatever we wanna do is the equipment one. The
Yeah.
equipment one is the easiest one to read.
Don't worry too much about that, we'd love to be able to just be able to get used to looking at
Yeah.
it, working with it.
No, that's
you know.
fine,
yeah, for me, it's like learning to read,
Yeah.
right.
and it's. Tom
Those old
loves,
guys, you know.
Tom
Yeah.
loves Jane,
Yeah.
6-spot run, I mean, this is what we're talking about.
I understand,
Yeah.
but I don't want, there's some things right now that I gotta tweak before I send it to you, and I'm not, and my problem is I won't come to the end, when I come back after next week, then I'll be able to deal with it.
He is on vacation next week, that's the big thing, that's why he's not promising next week,
What's that?
Go on, Vic.
but the week after.
I negotiated it before I started.
There you go. Is there any other business?
Not that I know of.
In that case.
I move.
I'm moved. I'm moved. Where'd you move, Tom?